This is a living history bonus video for the Sudbury regreening story. If you haven't seen the main episode yet, please check it out now. I will link it in the description. In today's video, I'm going to play some extra footage that I had to leave out of the main video. Peter Beckett, who's one of the godfathers of the whole regreening process, was kind enough to take me around and show me some important sites from Sudbury's regreening past. So I'm going to show some of those for you now, starting with a look at some of the control sites in the Kelly Lake area. Take a look.
We've walked out here. We're on an area where there's been no treatment, none of the Sudbury recipe. So this is what 40 years of no treatment would look like. And today we just see a few mosses, some grasses, and some red maple and some birch trees. But really there's very little growth out here. To our right, we can see the line where the liming ended in 1981. And subsequent to that, some red pine and jack pine have been planted and have grown into our developing new forest in Sudbury. So we're seeing the forest, which is 40 years old. There have been estimates that if we don't do anything, it might take 500 years up to 2,000 years to get natural recovery into an old Sudbury forest as we see on the right. So it points out the value of still doing regreening in Sudbury. Some of these trees are many years old, so they're not responding. Yet behind us, right, where they got the lime and the fertilizer and the trees got planted there, they look like trees which are 40 years old. And in fact, if we measure those trees and compare them to trees outside Sudbury, they're growing at roughly the same rate, which is good. We can look at the size of these birches compared to the ones in the Barron area. They have responded to the limestone and fertilizer, so they're the same age as the ones out on the Barron, but they're much taller trees and healthier looking trees. There's one deficiency in that forest, okay, in that we don't have a lot of the understory, the ground flora. We don't have all the herbs you would expect to see in the spring. So one of the things we're also doing in the regreening program is in areas where they're building new roads or new mines or new housing estates, we actually dig out the ground flora and bring them into Sudbury and make plots, and from which we hope the plants will spread out. And right now we can go and see one of those. This is it. So I'm looking at part of a plot that was introduced in 2010, where we're trying to bring in a number of the understory species to finish the completeness of the forest. So we've got things like Canada mayflower, blue-leaf lily over there, large-leaf aster, and typically in these areas we would bring in anywhere from 16 to 20 species. And I've just pointed out a few of the ones which I can see right away here. And they're spreading out. The idea is they spread out from the original plot. So we're just coming onto the Barron area right now. So this area again has received no treatment. There's been some growth of birch trees and some of the mosses. And you may ask, why has this area actually been left? Well, if we are looking in front of us, we're looking at the Kelly Lake Trail. This is part of the Trans-Canada Trail. So this area was left to be a demonstration for those people walking through Sudbury of what the moonscape landscape actually looked like. And then all around it, it has been regreened. What we don't have here yet, a little plaque that's supposed to be on the trail.
That was just some of the footage that we got around the Kelly Lake area. A little bit farther up the trail, Peter showed me an area that was regreened in 2016 with the new Sudbury recipe. It has some changes like more clovers instead of grasses as a type of cover plant. Up next, Peter's going to take us to a place just off of Martindale within Sudbury, so it's more of an urban regreening site. And this is a place where there's been photos taken every single year almost since the regreening process started to show the progression over time. Take a look at that now.
We're looking across an area which has had an annual photograph taken from before treatment in 1981, and we're looking at it now, so 41 years later. And it essentially is one of these urban sites, because we look around the site, it's full of houses, and so you can kind of imagine what this area would have looked like in 1981. People would have been looking out on all four sides, actually, onto a barren hill, and now they're looking into their own little patch of urban forest. And actually, when we look around and look at any of the hills here, they were all barren in the 1970s and 80s. And I look downtown, and you can't see the houses, you can't see the downtown hardly anymore for the growth of all the trees. And so I actually do use a general shot of this whole area in presentations to show how green Sudbury has become since the regreening program started in the 1970s. But the main thing is you can't see most of the houses anymore. So things are really growing up, and it's a mixture of forests. We've got pine trees which have been planted. We've also got the response, particularly here, of birch and some poplar and some oak. So this kind of urban forest that we're creating is a mixed forest with different colours up here in the autumn. I find it very kind of scenic.
I've got one last place to take us now. We're going to go east of town toward 𝗂𝗏𝗄𝗃, and there's a few things that Peter's going to highlight for us in this section. He's going to tell us a little bit more about the forest floor transplant process, which is an important part of regreening. He's also going to show us some of the very first trees that were ever planted as part of Sudbury's regreening program, and we're also going to visit another photo vantage point where there have been many photos taken over the years. Take a look.
Well, looking at a plant called 𝗪𝗵𝗿, which is one of the experimental plants that was tried a number of years ago to see whether it would survive as an understory plant, especially in more open areas. And this kind of chance discovery today, it's actually done very well. It's actually become a large patch through the whole of this area. In addition, I noticed that to our left, just over there, I see this was a trial plot of a Laurentian student who first tried to work out what is the best method of introducing the understory into the Sudbury forest. Do we cut out turfs? Do we collect the seed and then spread the seeds? Or do we individually transplant the different species? Her conclusion after a couple of years of research, the best thing to do was to cut out the turfs, and of course that's the method which has now been followed by the people who are doing the understory transplants in the program. This is the original part of the original tree planting, right? The area from Coniston to 𝗂𝗏𝗄𝗃 was one of the first areas treated because it actually looked the worst. And there's a story that goes with that there was a snow fence from 𝗂𝗏𝗄𝗃 through to Coniston put up for the winter to try and stop the snow from spreading across the highway. Well, of course, that's no longer needed because both sides of the highway now look like this. So no need for a snow fence. But these trees were actually planted in 1979. They were part of an experimental planting at that time to see what kind of survival rate we would actually get before the big tree planting program actually began. And there's about 70 to 80% success rate of the trees that were planted. This is the spot, okay? What we're looking at here is a contrast to a picture taken from, I think, this site in the late 1970s, before there was any regreening in the 𝗂𝗏𝗄𝗃 area. And we're looking now the result then of 40 years plus of carrying out the regreening and kind of imagine, compared to that 1970 picture, what 𝗏𝗏𝗏 now looks like. It's like a green oasis as opposed to a barren oasis of the 1970s.
That'll do it for this bonus video. Next week, I've got a Footnotes episode coming your way with a little bit more from the Sudbury regreening story that I haven't told you about yet. My thanks to Louisa behind the camera for helping me out.
Hey!
And we'll see you next week.